let's talk about Cybertruck. I think Cybertruck's going to be a good starting point here. So the one thing I'm noticing, and I saw you bring this up, I can't remember if it was in a video or a post on X, was that it's been very interesting watching the people that traditionally would hate this product melt down in a way, right?
Yeah,
talk me through that.
What are you, as I politically correctly pointed out? Yeah, it's I think the 5 stages of grief are starting to play out. Stage 1 is denial. Eventually people move to depression and eventually acceptance. But I'm seeing a lot of emotional responses from people. They're not talking about the specifications. They're just bringing out emotions. It's ugly. It's stupid. You're dumb. It can't do truck. You don't understand. Just this dickhead makes videos, doesn't know anything. Please bring me an argument with some numbers and look at the specs and explain to me why this doesn't make sense. So yeah, I am seeing some pretty visceral emotional reactions from a lot of traditional truck people. I think for whatever reason, their identity is tied to being a truck guy, and they just don't like the idea that they see the threat. They just psychologically aren't willing to admit it. So they're just overdosing on cope and hopium at the moment, and not going to end well. But I found a lot of amusement and entertainment reading the comments on some of the reviews and the previews of the Cybertruck videos on those major YouTube channels, and a lot of positive comments. But yeah, there's a very strong cope, and I think that's a result of people seeing a legitimate threat. It's like if a guy is out with his girl and some 6'5", just absolute Chad is hanging out, and he notices his girl looking at him. Guys might get really defensive and want to try and beat him up. That's just the emotional response to a legitimate threat being seen from people who just don't know how to process those emotions. So, but yeah, I think it is a legitimate threat for the traditional truck market, and a lot of people are just currently experiencing denial.
Yeah. Well, did you get a chance to watch? It dropped today. I don't know if you probably were sleeping, but Jason Camisa, the guy from Haggerty, the interviewer.
Yeah. I did see a clip. I saw a clip or so. Was he talking to that guy who was on Joe Rogan and since disappeared from X? Yeah, the guy. Yeah.
Dude, so they had a 2.5 hour long podcast.
Right,
I'm assuming
I haven't seen. I've seen a couple of clips on X. Some great moments. Talking about how big the recall is, and Jason's like, it's actually about the driver monitoring, and it's obviously a software update, and so this guy's still digging himself deeper into the hole, is he?
Yeah. So what's interesting there sort of aligns with what you said, because one of the things that I've been finding very fascinating is the cultural impact of Tesla and the Cybertruck in the coming months and years. Because I think it's something worthy to talk about, to be honest, because there's, and it almost like in a way, I don't want to say like aligns with, let's say, the type of attitude or lack of a better word, the way Elon is carrying himself, let's say in the public's eye, either on purpose or it's premeditated, whatever. We can argue that or whatever it is, but it's like encapsulating this sort of like movement towards, look at this thing. It's a big fuck you to a lot of people, and you're going to like it or not, but bro, we're here and we're just better than everybody else. And what was really fascinating about that conversation, I think Jason, honestly, what I love about his work is I really think he tries extremely hard to be neutral. He tries to be have journalistic integrity, which I super respect, and it's very rare. And
you're right, by the way. He does have his own personal opinions, but they don't come to the surface. I've seen him dodging questions where I think even with you when you spoke to him recently, where he didn't really want to get into his opinions. He's like, I'm a journalist, so I'm not going to share what I think. It's objective, and definitely Jason is sort of being true to the facts and not letting his personal opinions get involved. So,
and that's what that conversation was. So 2.5 hours. If you have the time, I would recommend it. It's like it's at the very least a very entertaining watch. Matt, Matt very obviously. Yeah, Matt is a very he is super clouded by his natural bias against Elon and against Tesla. And you have Jason with him, and Jason is by no means a Tesla guy. He's a guy that's just trying to be an automotive journalist. And it's so fascinating watching both guys that are traditionally not in the Tesla space whatsoever. Matt has something that he's very upset about with Elon and Tesla and the Cybertruck, and Jason's just like, here are the facts that are directly refuting that. And it's 2.5 hours of that. And that was like, it's super fascinating. Dude, it's wild. But it's like, that's where we are. That's where we are with this car. you know? It's yeah, it's just so fascinating to watch. And so what my gut is telling me now is that there's no world, and again, this might be me going out there being overly optimistic, too bullish, whatever you want to call it, and I'll admit to it, it's an opinion, obviously, that there's no way this car won't be a gigantic success. Just based on the merits of the vehicle, like you said, like the facts speak for themselves. And when you have somebody like a Jason or the other reviewers as well, the folks from Top Gear, the folks from CarWow, MKBHD, and all these independent people all coming out with the same voice that says this thing fucking rules. It just looks crazy, and it might make you seem like somebody who loves Elon, which a lot of people might not think is a good thing. But like, if the product speaks for itself and most people are making decisions based on how happy is this going to make me, forget about the political statement it makes or whatever, how is this thing not going to sell every single unit they make for the next decade? Like, how is that not going to be the case?
100%, man. I mean, we have the fact that there's over 2 million reservations globally for Cybertruck. I mean, you can't ignore that. And that's before people have experienced the product. That was just based on people either looking at the specs and all the appearance, going, I want this thing. When people start seeing what they can do and I mean, somebody like Matt might never convert, he might be just too overcome by his emotions, but this is going to be a process where people who immediately had a gut reaction, this thing won't do truck things, it's stupid, it looks dumb, I hate Elon, whatever, and they see what it can do and keep seeing what it can do and hearing what it can do. Eventually, most of these people will realize and they'll accept eventually. They'll go through to the final process of grief, and they'll go through denial and depression, eventually accept, you know what, this thing, even despite my preconceptions, it's just too good to ignore. And I think that will take time, but it's inevitable that this is going to set the bar for what people expect from a truck. And I don't think most people in the traditional truck world are ready to understand this yet. Just an emotional reaction happens straight away, and that's it. Feelings are involved, facts, they don't even register. But over time, as more and more people see what this thing's capable of doing, they see them on work sites in particular. Just think of what happens when the first guy rolls up to a work site throughout the US in a Cybertruck. And everyone goes, "You fucking idiot, it's Cybertruck. Wait, what can it do?" Then they see and like, what? Bro, that's going to happen everywhere, over and over and over. And then if you think 2 million reservations now is a lot, just think about how many that will turn into of new orders flowing through. Doesn't mean that 100% of people that see a Cybertruck and what it could do will want one or buy one. But a large percentage of people today who are completely writing this thing off because of their feelings, once they see what it can do, it's going to be game over. And I think that people are widely underestimating the scale of this. I really do think that Cybertruck's going to be at least 500,000, maybe 750,000 plus units per year just in the US alone when it hits volume. And I don't think Tesla expected the demand and the interest when they first announced and launched the Cybertruck. They've obviously got the data, and they realize now that there's going to be a lot more interest in this thing than you would have expected. And one proof point of that is where the pricing came in right now. Tesla has priced the Cybertruck more than they needed to. Part of that is because of inflation, and part of that is for biting off more than they could chew, but also part of that is just to hit the market clearing price. If this thing was priced at those original prices, or even just inflation adjusted from when it was announced, there'd be too many orders flowing through, and people would just be waiting a stupid amount of time. And so that's another indication that Tesla was willing to massively jack prices up beyond what people would have expected, because there's so much demand and interest in this thing that they can't not. Because it's a terrible customer experience unless you're a diehard fanboy or fangirl who's been waiting and you're willing to wait. It's terrible if you're waiting 6+ months to take delivery of a vehicle you're ordering. It's a terrible experience. People want stuff now. This is why people pay for express shipping and will pay a huge premium to get something now. So yeah, I expect this thing ultimately is going to be probably the best-selling truck of any kind in the United States per year, but it will take many years to ramp to that volume.
Yeah, I think the waiting thing is also interesting because folks have already waited 4 years. So like, you think about that as like, okay, so there were, so was Franz saying 2 million reservations on Jay Leno the first time you heard that from the company?
Yeah, I mean, we know because of the public reservation tracker that the autistic savants reverse engineered the reservation numbers.
Wild.
But this is international reservations because it was available to reserve in multiple regions. But I think a good proxy, you probably halve that at least. There's probably at least 1 million reservations just in the US. But France has now publicly admitted what we already knew through the reservation tracker, that yes, indeed, over 2 million reservations did come through for this thing before we started deliveries. And that's the first time that Tesla has said that. Elon was very careful to say over a million reservations, and that was very intentional. A lot of people like to invent meaning. I remember seeing a lot of media reports that there's 1 million Cybertruck reservations, because Elon said over a million. But yeah, it's always been over 2, and that's pretty stunning. When was there a product ever that's had 2 million reservations where people had to put money down, even if it's only $100 ever?
Yeah, never. Not even close.
Madness.
Not even close. The one thing that I'm starting to see is a lot of, and this is where I'm trying so hard. You know, my New Year's resolution, Steven, is going to be tempering my expectations, and I'm already like failing horrifically. And the reason why is I'm watching a lot of folks that are, you know, very close to the Tesla space, you know, yourself and a lot of other people, obviously, but it seems like there's a chorus starting to become louder in the last few days and weeks, especially as we've seen sort of the amount of Cybertrucks that are coming out of the factory now, some of the footage from the Sandy Monroe walkthroughs, the interviews with the engineering team. It seems like the 200 to 250,000 figure per year at capacity is a pretty gigantic sandbag. It is sort of the vibe that's out there. What clues are you looking for that, like when you say 500 to 750,000, is it just purely based on what you think the demand's going to be, or are you seeing other clues that are coming out of the company?
Yeah, I mean, I think just at a steady state, if you look at the F-Series Fords, that's all inclusive, the 150, 250, 350, which includes, for those people who don't know, the really heavy-duty trucks that are just ridiculous, pure power for insane, you know, towing tractors or, you know, pulling a mountain or something like that, just over the top. Close to 1 million units per year on their best years, okay? So there's a benchmark for how much a really successful product and some variations within that product, like for a long range, et cetera, performance version, you know, can do. So that's probably the high watermark for what's been possible in the past. And I think that when people see what the Cybertruck can do in terms of the specs, it over-delivers on just about everything. You know, it can compete with some of these, the F250 and 350 on a lot of things. So that's one point of reasoning. The huge reservation backlog, and then the fact that the more Cybertrucks Tesla sells, the more Cybertrucks they'll ultimately sell because of word of mouth, people seeing what they can do. It seems inevitable. You'd have to be on drugs not to expect at least 500,000 per year of these in the US at minimum. And I think it's going to be much closer to 1 million, but you don't know for sure. Now, in terms of the production systems, I think that Tesla's goal here is to get a production line, not just one line, but I mean, stage 1 of Cybertruck production is 250,000 module. Just think about it like a module. Nail that, figure out the production systems, then duplicate with new innovations that they've learned from the first, then duplicate as many times as necessary. So they might do that 2 or 3 times, maybe even, you know, more. And that's where I see in terms of Cybertruck production, because there's going to be a lot of things that Tesla are basically brain dead morons when it comes to Cybertruck production now, because they haven't done it at volume yet. They've invented their production systems. They're trying, but they don't know what the fuck they're doing yet. It's the best version of what they could be doing, but they're going to look back 3, 4, 5 years from now and go, why were we doing it that way? Why did we do this? I can't believe there's going to be a huge amount of innovation there. And so I think that Cybertruck, Tesla's goal really is to get to the 250,000 units per year, nail that, get that seamlessly flowing along that production system, and then whatever they can learn, make sort of a version 2.0 of Cybertruck production for the next 250,000. And Tesla knows that they've got space already in Austin, and they can scale as much as they need to. So I think Tesla really, maybe you could call it a sandbag, but I really just think it's inevitable that Tesla doesn't want to build production capacity for 1 million Cybertrucks per year when they're still figuring out how to make them properly. It's going to take time. So yeah, I think that the first 250,000 a year is just how do we make this thing at volume, figure out how to improve. Instead of thinking about each new gigafactory as a whole new factory, think about each new production line as a whole new production line. Same kind of thing happened with Model Y where the gigacasting was implemented. It didn't simultaneously roll out everywhere at the same time. They started in one factory location, figure that out, and then implement. And then eventually there's improvements to Model 3 as well. So I think Cybertruck's going to be similar.
Yeah, I think that the fact that you bring up, you know, F Series, Ram, Silverado, these pickup trucks in the US, I think last figure full year number we got was like 20 to 25% of the total market. The total market is like 13 to 14 million in the US. So that's like 4 million trucks a year just in the US between those 3 brands. And then so if you take that and you put it against, okay, so Model Y versus the rest of the SUV market, Model 3, you know, just to call it premium luxury market, Model 3 versus the premium sedan market. and then you just analyze those buckets, you're like, wow, these guys are getting gigantic share of those things.
Yes.
Why
They're
would
making
that
a
not
mockery of
apply?
everything else in the categories.
Exactly. And so the obvious question becomes, why wouldn't that happen with the Cybertruck? And the thing I always run into with folks that are on the other side, that are, that I love speaking with, that are saying this is not going to do as good as you think, they're like, well, it just looks way too crazy. It's like a very subjective sort of opinion. It's like, hey, this is going to be, it's not going to do as well because people are not going to like the way it looks. And I'm like, okay, maybe. But to your point, when you're thinking about, in the United States, a pickup truck is not really used as a pickup truck. For one, it's used as a status symbol and as a grocery getter and as a, the American way of, maybe I'll need to do that one thing one time, which we'll never end up doing, but let's have a car just in case, right? That can do that. So, okay. So Cybertruck can do literally every single one of those things. Fantastic. Cool. So okay, so if we're just saying it's just a look thing, then my pushback to that is like, that's not fact driven, but I understand why you would say that. Let's see how the data plays out into the future. Based on the 2 million reservations, you're probably incorrect, but let's see. But then you think about the work crowd, which is the really interesting one. I really don't think these people really going to give a shit how it looks. All they care about is cost per minute of usage. And if the Cybertruck is going to be able to do significantly lower cost over the time that you own it, why wouldn't every business use the Cybertruck? And that I haven't been able to get a proper answer for that, because they'll say, well, it can't tow 300 miles straight. I'm like, how many work trucks do that? It's like a single digit percent,
Exactly. It's pretty much only the Super Duty F350s and so on, which again is a fraction of the market. And as I mentioned previously on X, Tesla is aiming to address the needs of the 80% that need a work truck, not the other 20%. So forget the 20% on the fringes. What are the 80% want? And you're absolutely right. And I think one of the really key bits of the misunderstanding around Cybertruck, when people talk about the aesthetics, imagine no vehicles existed and the Cybertruck was the very first vehicle to ever exist. You think people would be saying, I'm not buying it because it looks shit. They wouldn't have anything to compare to. People just, takes a while for some people to adjust to change. It's just because people are using a frame of reference of what does everything else look like now, when consumers typically, unless they have like a micro penis, etc., typically aren't buying a vehicle based on its aesthetics. That might be a secondary or a tertiary consideration, but they're really thinking about, what does it cost? What does it do? Can it suit my needs? And a lot of people, just because of how unusual Cybertruck looks, have this visceral reaction to the appearance, and then immediately they just can't even think about the facts and what it's capable of doing. I think the idea, the reasoning or lack thereof, that it looks weird and therefore people won't buy it just because of the appearance, that's absurd. There will be some very small number of consumers who care that much about the aesthetics, but if it shits all over everything in terms of its specs and in terms of value for money, what it offers, and the people like you mentioned that want it to do the work things and the numbers really matter to them, why would they care? How many people driving around pickup trucks jacked and not overweight and look after themselves and super clean and tidy and meticulously grouped? Not that many. So the idea that aesthetics are that important to typical consumers or just a pickup truck doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
What's more important, the car you drive around in and your personal appearance? I think a lot of people just assume looks weird, therefore people will reject it. And I just think it's going to take time for people to get used to it. You'll probably have seen the comments of people's changing perceptions on Cybertruck. If you read the YouTube comments on X, I hated it at first, but I actually like it now. That happens very regularly, where people initially were repulsed and now they've grown to love it. So, and I think that's going to play out. But again, if there were no vehicles on Earth and the Cybertruck was the first product, I don't think there'd be a single person saying, this is so ugly, I hate it. Because there'd be no basis for comparison at all. It's just entirely new.
And the other variable too is that what I hear on the other side as well, after a few years, and this is when I spoke with Jason on my channel, which again, I'm so thankful that he came on. Like that was such an awesome conversation with him. But with him,
I recommend it, by the way, for anyone
said,
listening. Definitely check it out. It was a good chat.
Thank you so much, man. I appreciate that. But one of the things he said that I kind of agree with, but it has multiple implications. So he said that, after a few years, the cyber, just like any other car, if you see a car enough, it's going to look normal, right? I'm like, okay, so I agree 100% with that statement. But then if you think about, okay, what does that also mean? It means number one, all the people that were viscerally like, oh my God, this is because of the looks, I'm not going to buy it. that TAM opens, and if your if your theory is that that TAM is large, okay, well at some point that TAM is going to be there, right? So then that's number one, and then number two, if the Cybertruck starts looking normal, what's every other car going to look like? You know?
Yeah.
So if the Cybertruck is going to look normal, looking like that, isn't every other car going to look like they are a century
Princess
behind?
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're
So it's
actually
like,
right. Yeah.
Do you have
It's
any thoughts there?
redefined what people will expect. And I do think that it's kind of going to look like a horse and buggy or a princess wagon by comparison. It just will take time for people to get used to it.
Yeah. It's fascinating, man. And I thought the way Tesla, it was such a, it was a being there had a very different vibe than on the live stream, because I know a lot of people were like, what the hell, you can't even see Elon's face. Like, it's clear Tesla doesn't give a shit about how they look. They just want to get the engineering product out.
Correct.
You know? That's all they care about. And it's so obvious. But I thought they did a really good job. I thought giving those publications access ahead of time, especially somebody like a Jason from Haggerty, was brilliant, because it tells you how confident they were about the product, that they were willing to put it in the hands of somebody who has a reputation for not pulling any punches, and they know this thing is going to be super divisive, and they still gave it to him. And then Jason did a fantastic job staying true to his work, and still can't help but be honest about the product, which is this thing is freaking killer. It's a freaking killer product. But then we can all talk about, okay, what does this mean from a sales volume perspective? You and I are obviously in the high side versus somebody like him. But if it does become normal over time, then I think that implies that that it will be a huge success. And so that's where I'm at now. You know, it's like, and this is where I said, I'm trying to temper my expectations. This is why I'm struggling to temper my expectations, because of that line of reasoning. So tell me why I'm being stupid.
You're not.
Fuck.
I mean, you're probably being stupid by over tempering your expectations. You know, we've got the evidence, the 2 million reservations. We've seen the specs. The average pickup truck, you know, in the US is selling for around $67,000. Spec for spec, dollar for dollar. Cybertruck shits all over that. Good luck competing on value. You can't. Functionality, you can't. Toughness, utility, you can't. Now, the only way to compete with Cybertruck is to copy the exoskeleton with stainless steel. Otherwise, you won't have the durability. You'll have painted scratches. You'll have all the body panels you need to form. You cannot compete with Cybertruck on cost, features, and functionality unless you copy its form factor. So you've got to invent your own alloy, figure out how to do the same stuff that Tesla's doing in terms of production. Ramp up production when Tesla's at that stage, probably already 500,000+ per year, and then be embarrassed because you copy Tesla. You look like a moron. Can you just imagine when the first pickup truck comes out from one of Tesla's competitors that's using a stainless steel exoskeleton?
Oh, God.
Everyone's going to look and go, you fucking losers. Why are you copying? It's just over. It's a rock and a hard place situation. I don't think people are appreciating it. You know, that's a great point. Cybertruck is a very first principles product. There's so few parts in terms of the exoskeleton that just the production costs and the speed to produce this thing, there's no other truck that's going to be able to replicate how quickly you can produce it, how few parts there are, so few things that can break down in the process. I think I heard on the interview with Sandy Munro walking through, there was like 150 parts or something on the whole vehicle in terms of on the body. So
I think I heard that too.
It's hardly anything versus the typical vehicle. So you have to copy this thing or you'll perish. And that's why that Cybertruck is engineering genius video, the second one on the YouTube channel that I ever posted, in parentheses, Cybertruck is engineering genius and will be copied. I meant that. Because if the companies don't try to copy this thing, they're not going to be selling pickup trucks at volume. The Cybertrucks just set the bar. And the only way to copy its functionality and cost is going to be to copy the form.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because we kind of see that already with their existing lineup with, say, the Model Y and the Model 3. You know, if it's not as extreme, but if you don't have the battery efficiency, if you don't have the drivetrain, if you don't have the infotainment system, if you don't have sort of the complete package, the safety, we see it in the numbers. I mean, it's very obvious. You can just see it in the numbers. The Model Y and the Model 3 dominate the classes that they sell into, especially the Model Y.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But the Cybertruck takes it to a whole new level. So like if Cybertruck's successful, which both you and I think it's going to be massively successful, they've moated pickup trucks. They have just created a moat around pickup trucks. And so it's like, then Ford, Chevy, Ram, Toyota, all these other brands that have a lot of pickup truck sales, all of a sudden, I mean, but this is something that the Tesla community has been talking about for the longest time. at some point the shoe will drop. All the profits are gone from legacy automakers, and they will not have the innovation to catch up. And then all hell breaks loose. You know?
Yeah, it's not that far off either. I don't think people are expecting how. I reckon 2-3 years from now, ICE sales will be in free fall, and we'll be seeing double-digit percentage year-over-year declines in ICE vehicle sales. That will completely annihilate the mega profits that companies have selling them today, because economies of scale reverse. Then they're not making money selling ICE vehicles. So why would they keep making them? They're not making money selling EVs because they're years behind and they didn't ramp fast enough. They're so fucked. It's unbelievable. And based on the public statements, these companies think, maybe they don't internally, but at least what they say publicly, they still think they're going to be milking profits from ICE vehicles in 2030. Not happening, bro.
There's no way.
Lucky. It'd be lucky if any of the world's million-plus vehicle per year ICE manufacturers make any profits, any of them, on the record. Clip it, guys. Revisit. 2027. I don't think a single company selling ICE vehicles, as the majority of their vehicles, will make any profit at all for the full year of 2027 or beyond. It could be off by a year or so, and most of them are still expecting that they can produce ICE vehicles, especially big trucks, make huge profits on those and use those profits to scale their EVs. But yeah, I think they're going to be copying it from all directions because those ICE sales are about to drop off a cliff.
Yeah, it's gonna get nasty. I agree with you 100%. I think maybe they could make a profit if maybe something like a Ford, or if any of them maybe either do a bankruptcy thing ahead of time or something like that.
If we split businesses off and bankrupt and this, that, and the other emerges, all bets are off.
Okay.
I mean, if you go bankrupt in order to make a profit, I'm not sure that
it doesn't count.
Yeah,
that's fair.